All right, Bert, let me ask you this. I feel good because I bet the game 3 times last night.
What was the spread?
6.5. I got him at 6.5, and then I got him at 18.5.
I think I said
now it makes sense that I asked everyone about the spread because I'm like, it's 6.5. You don't like that? And every one of them said they didn't like it, that they liked the Patriots.
I feel vindicated because I said on Sunday night the Jets should win going away. And I got looked at sideways. And it got brought up yesterday on the midday show. And here's the question for all of you guys. Is there a single position group on the Patriots roster that you would take over the Jets? Over what the Jets have?
Okay, no linebackers, not the defensive line, certainly not the secondary, not the running back.
What about safety if Peppers is healthy?
Well, if you break up the secondary,
if you break up the secondary, because I'm not taking the corners.
I'm trying to find something here.
No, the answer is no.
A single position group.
No.
All right.
No. So why did anyone
I was
think
crazy for saying the Jets should win going away? This is not these are two teams that are in very different stations of building, and the numbers are so much worse than the final score.
Oh yeah.
It was 400 to 139 in total yards. That's like when an SEC team plays a Sunbelt.
40 to 20 in time of possession. I mean, it was awful.
And that's even with some BS yards at the end.
The Jets, we said this earlier, the Jets committed over 100 yards of penalties and still won by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, 1956 time of possession, including that last where they're going for it on 4th and 10 and still had possession. I mean, it's horrific.
The Jets are a good example of how it takes time and where they've invested. And if you look at it, right, the players that have made big plays for them last night, a lot of them were high first-round picks. Garrett Wilson was a top 10 pick. Sauce Gardner's a top 10 pick. Quinnen Williams is a top 5 pick. Will McDonald, first-round pick. Mm-hmm. Who comes in at tackle when Morgan Moses gets hurt? It's Olu Fashanu, who's the 11th pick in the draft. So I think there is a lesson in that, look, again, and this was the whole problem I had with them drafting Cole Strange 2 years ago. You can find a guard, right? You got to draft tackles. You got to draft defensive ends. You got to draft corners, draft receivers, and it just takes time. And when you have holes at multiple premium positions, you can't snap your fingers and make it work in one offseason, and the Jets are a really good example.
So let me ask you one thing that I could see as a problem with the Jets right now. I wonder about their discipline and their
I'm not crowning them.
Okay, no, and I'm not crowning them either. But I wonder about their maturity, because the one area where the Patriots were not great last night, but at least did better than the Jets. Was the penalties. And
right.
8 for 106 for the Jets.
There were some marginal penalties, like the roughing penalty when on the safety when he put his head down.
That was a terrible call.
That was a bad call. The DJ Reed pass interference
was ticky-tack.
I mean,
they almost got tangled up on that play. Where it's just you could have.
I mean, he was holding his arm, but
he was.
But there's other stuff. There's another personal foul.
The Jets have been terrible they've been undisciplined and terrible with penalties. But just last night, 2 major ones.
Is that a culture thing? Is it a solid thing, or do they have some players that?
Well, I think, and Bert, you can tell me if I'm wrong, because if I'm not mistaken, the man talks to coaches, but I'm not positive he talks to Robert Saleh. Wink. But is that something that coaches are like? It seems to me, watching the NFL since they put these strict rules into place, that coaches are almost willing to take the 15-yard penalty. They'd rather have you be aggressive than not, and get a penalty that's borderline.
I think that there's definitely some. It's hard to avoid some of the stuff,
right,
in today's NFL,
because they don't want you slowing up and not making the tackle, right?
They don't want you. They don't want you playing hesitant.
Right.
It's hard to pull back on certain things. There's also circumstances where flags get thrown for unsportsmanlike, where you might be sticking up for a teammate, which they're okay with. There are different things where there's a difference between being immature and selfish, where you're getting in a stupid fight, versus a tackle decking a defensive end because he took a questionable shot at the quarterback.
Sure.
Those are two different things.
Well, they were talking about that last night, about how the lineman for the Jets stood up to
Giovanni Tavai
Tavai
for body
after he
slamming
body
Brees
slammed
Hall.
Brees Hall.
Yeah.
And then went, what did I do? Well, you body
Yeah.
slammed Brees Hall. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's what's going to go. All right. Let's get into it. Drake Maye. Okay. The quarterback chart right now is Jacoby Brissett, Drake Maye, Joe Milton. Joe Milton's his sixth round pick. The Brissett, the way he's getting hit, will get hurt this year. He's not. He's not.
That's one of my main takeaways from the first half of that game was like they're not. They may not have it. They're probably not going to have a choice on when they put May in.
Okay, so if Brissett gets hurt, that means you put May in, and that means May gets hurt. Because so my question is this. I don't, and I've said this to you, I think, every week since you've come back on. I don't think May should be the backup quarterback for this team. Why are they being so precious with the 6th round pick that they won't bring a veteran in?
Because you want to keep developing young quarterbacks, and I understand like the desire to keep them in the pipeline and develop them that way. And if you were going to sneak them through the practice squad, the time to do it was the cut down when there's a million people on the waiver wire. And, teams don't have the time to sit down and, like look at every single guy. So you can kind of sneak a guy through. I don't think you have to cut. I think you can carry 4, I don't think that it's like an impossible thing to keep 4 quarterbacks on your roster, especially because you're not very good, so this is like the Patriots in 2000, and I'm not comparing it to a Brady circumstance, but part of the reason they were able to keep Brady on the roster in 2000, and when they had 4 quarterbacks, it was Bledsoe, Bishop, Freeze, and Brady, I think.
The one I didn't know was Freeze. So
yeah, it was
there
John
you go.
Freeze. You guys remember him?
Third string.
Drums for the Vandals.
Yeah, so he but the reason why is because the roster wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And they felt like we only have like 45 real NFL players on our roster. So if we've got to go one light at another spot, it's not the end of the world. That's what if I'm them, I think that's probably what I would do. I wouldn't put Drake Maye out there in this circumstance. I mean, that was, and look, like every pass rush isn't going to be like the Jets, but this is the Jets without Jermaine Johnson.
And without Reddick, and without John Franklin Myers, and without Huff, and everyone else.
And the Niners are every bit as good or better up front than the Jets, and you have them next. So look.
So what do you do? What's the solution?
I said this last night on TV. Like the expectation on the part of the Patriots coaching staff is that Drake Maye is going to play at some point this season, right? I think that they haven't put a line on it. I think the idea would be maybe the last month or maybe at some point in November that they go to him. And at that point, the hope would be that you have it developed to a point where you can manage it. The problem is, and I think that this is sort of a multi-layered thing where, all right, so like you can manage it a certain way. Put in stuff he's comfortable with. They have some stuff he's comfortable with that crosses over with the stuff that he did in North Carolina. They've been creative about ramping him up. You heard the 30% number, right? All that is, and what they're doing in practice right now is, okay, when the ones are out there in this team period, Jacoby Brissett is very comfortable with this play. We'll pull him off the field. We'll put Drake in. That's how they're doing it, right? That's the benefit of having Jacoby having had experience playing for Alex Van Pelt the year before. He doesn't need every rep. So they're doing things like that. They're doing things like cutting the scout team reps in half and giving Drake half of that time to go and work with T.C. McCartney in the Patriots office to ramp him up and get him ready to play. The run game, you can lean on the run game. Here's the problem. If you can't control the score, that's going to be an issue. And you can say just go and lose the games, but the problem is, okay, so like now you're down 28-10 in the third quarter of a game, and you're in 3rd and 14, and you're running a draw to protect your young quarterback. How do you think the rest of the locker room is going to process that?
Right.
Like, how is the rest of the locker room going to take that? And how much more difficult do you make things on Gerard Mayo if you're doing things that way?
First-year coach trying to set a culture,
it's
establish
a really
culture.
hard spot to be in, So, like, based on last night, it's you can't control the score, you can't control down in distance. I don't see this as a healthy situation for a young quarterback to be in. And all I think, to me, like the Bryce Young thing is so instructive. So instructive of how you can mess this thing up.
Well, like I said before, last week, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold all won games and played well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they were all considered at one point or another, some of them jokes. Darnold, I'm seeing ghost. Geno Smith getting hit in the face in the locker room by a teammate.
And Polly.
Yeah, exactly. And then Mayfield was a clown and a mistake. And I mean, I thought Mayfield was a clown and a mistake. He's obviously matured. So, I mean, it just shows that, and it's not like those guys didn't have physical gifts, especially Darnold. Darnold was really physically gifted, and it just was. He just was on a horrible organization with a horrible coach.
He was raw, and Adam Gase was trying to play him like he was Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
what are you doing?
And Adam Gase is, we'll get into far in the weeds probably with this, but just as an example of how you can ruin a quarterback, remember Gase just spent 12 hours a day with Darnold at the expense of everyone else on the team. He would just sit there with Darnold. Like he was the head coach of the team, and he was only with Darnold. Very strange.
Well, and Zach Wilson. Look at the difference between the environment Zach Wilson was in 2 years ago and the environment that Aaron Rodgers is in right now. 2 years ago, the Jets were a mess. And, or 3 years ago now, I guess it was, right? 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
The Jets were a complete disaster. And what Aaron Rodgers has now around him, like, if you put Zach Wilson in that situation, maybe he would have been all right.
I don't know. He wasn't very good last year. All right. Bert Breer is here. He is from MMQB in the Amazon broadcast on Thursday nights. He joins us after the Amazon broadcast. All right. A bad performance from the Patriots in all phases of the game yesterday. How many of these can a new coach stand? Like, when do you see generally with teams that there's a shift in attitude?
Well, I think, like, the model for you has to be the 2021 Detroit Lions. And I think, if you watch that team play, they were in most games. Hardy, you can probably remember that team pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They weren't very good, but they sort of kept chipping away at it. And I believe they made the coordinator change in midseason, right, which shook things up. If I remember right, who was their offensive coordinator at the beginning of the year? Was it Anthony Lynn? And then they fired him halfway through the year and went to Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
Did Lynn take over from Cooter?
Cooter
Bevel.
was
No,
it was
Bevel.
Bevel.
Okay.
No, Cooter was the first year of Patricia, and then Bevel took over.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Cooter
Cooter carried over from Jim Caldwell because Cooter was a Peyton Manning guy.
Right. Okay. So Anthony Lynn,
Yep.
they make the change.
And then Ben Johnson comes in and, it kind of gives them some more life. So, but, that team was not very good. They obviously wound up with the second pick in the draft. But, to me, that's the model, right? Is the team that continues to play hard, that continues to play with a certain identity, that is in games. And I'm just, looking now at their season. I think they were 0-10.
0-10-1.
0-10-1.
Yeah.
And then down the stretch, I talked to. It was actually interesting because I talked to when I talked to Jared Goff about this in the summer, he mentioned the win they had. Their second one was over Arizona.
Right.
It doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But Arizona at the time was 9-5 or 10-4 or something like that. It was a really good Arizona team. And we were talking about having a target on your back and how the Lions now have the target on their back and how they're going to get everybody's best shot. And he said, I remember, I remember what it was like to be the team that's shooting at those targets, And so for us, even beating the Cardinals was a really big deal because we sort of messed with the playoff race by doing that. And so, you look and there are blowouts in there. They got run off the field by the Broncos in Week 14, 38-10. They got the crap knocked out of them by the Seahawks, 51-29 at the end of the year. They got beat by the Eagles on Thanksgiving or on Halloween, 44-6. But in between there, you've got a tie with the Steelers. You have a 3-point loss to the Browns. You have a 2-point loss to the Bears. You have a 4-point loss to the Falcons. So that team would get blown out. but you wouldn't see like 3 blowouts in a row. And I know that's like a really low bar.
Yeah, come on, Bert.
I know that's a really low bar, but there's something to that, right? There's something to getting your doors blown off and then coming back and playing in a competitive game the next week. And I think that's what you're shooting for, is that you're getting the level of engagement where week over week, even if you take just a shiner, the way that they took a shiner last night at the hands of the Jets, you're able to bounce back and put together a representative performance. And I think
for the
and look,
Patriots, are we just going to go ahead and circle a second consecutive blowout to the 49ers next week,
and then play the Dolphins,
and then hope for a representative effort against the Dolphins at home?
I mean, and that's sort of where you are, though. And I would say this too: the Lions people would tell you that having to go through that for the guys that were there, like the Jared Goffs, the Penei Sewells, the Taylor Deckers, the Frank Ragnows, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the guys who went through that, like, it created something.
Easy to say after a couple of years later.
Because they were like 2-6 the next year.
But easy to say once you've made it to an NFC championship game. I'm sure they're saying that now. Right. But I don't know that you can have that, that same level of zen if you never make it that far. And I'm not saying that won't happen. There's at least the possibility that Drake Maye could be the quarterback and they shore things up on the offensive line. But that is my question. When the Lions were going through that, what did the lines look like on both sides of the ball, and how were they building that team?
They were building that team through the lines of scrimmage, which is what you're going to have to do here.
Nobody wants to sit through that. It's not sexy. It's not fun. But
they spent a high first round pick, their first high first round pick on offensive tackle.
Yep.
And their second high first round pick on a defensive end.
It would hurt a lot less if
it was Penei Sewell and Aiden Hutchinson.
It would hurt a lot less, Hardy, if they didn't just punt away the last 4 years before this. Yes, it's not just the rebuild now; it's the 4 years leading up to this rebuild, which is 7 or 8.
Wait a second. Are you comparing what Patriots fans have had to go through with what Lions fans?
No. Not comparing that.
No, but if they would have ripped the Band-Aid off and did this 4 years ago, but
I think that was the cost to having a 70-year-old coach.
Yes, I know, but the 70-year-old coach could also still be a coach if the coach was willing to accept the fact that they weren't good and that they were going to have to go down to bare bones.
But you're talking about patience. Patience would be easier to come by if they hadn't just spent the last 4 years slipping into the abyss.
And if everyone hadn't bought into it like morons to think that free agent spending spree was the greatest thing that ever happened.
You're welcome.
You're getting it. Yes.
Well, the crazy
you're
thing
welcome.
is, the crazy thing
you're supposed
is,
to say thank you.
So
and then I would respond, you're welcome.
A half decade out, they're still chasing the Isaiah Wynn miss. A half decade out, they're still chasing the N'Keal Harry miss.
Yeah.
They're still chasing those misses.
Tyquan Thornton.
Well, but I'm saying like
I know, but
first round picks on like a first round pick on a receiver that you expected to be your number one, that you took over Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin.
Tyquan Thornton was sticking forward Pickens and a bunch of others. Remember there was that run of receivers
right
after he was
right.
taken.
Yes.
And he wasn't taking that much further than behind where they took the guy you just mentioned, the first round receiver.
N'Keal
Harry. N'Keal Harry was a late first round pick. Tyquan Thornton was a high second round pick.
And like with Isaiah Wynn, like, all right, so 2 years ago you take Cole Strange, okay? You traded out of a spot that was Trent McDuffie. So that could go a couple of ways. Either you take Trent McDuffie there, and now you've got a first-team All-Pro corner, and maybe you can spend the pick last year on an offensive tackle instead of Christian Gonzalez. And I'm not saying you should be over the moon with Christian Gonzalez.
He was
great again last night.
And he was great again last night.
Yeah.
But like if you take Trent McDuffie, maybe you're taking an offensive tackle last year instead, right?
Right.
Or you don't trade out of that. You don't trade down in 2022, and you take Tyler Smith, who has become one of the best guards in football and was a tackle in college. So maybe he would have been a tackle for you. And Dallas winds up taking him 24th overall. If you get a tackle instead of a guard there, now all of a sudden the left tackle position's taken care of, and the offensive line looks completely different. again, they're paying for all of these mistakes now, and this is why you cannot build in veteran free agency or through trade. You just can't do it. Even the teams that have been really aggressive in those areas, the Rams were really aggressive in those areas, but so much of the core of their team was homegrown.
Yeah.
So like you can't do it without a foundation that was built from within. And the reality is that all of these misses in the draft are now need to be made up for, and you can't make up for it in a single draft or a single offseason.
All right, we'll keep Bert for one more break on the account of he was talking what can only be described as horrific traffic.
Yeah, and I think that map probably helped illustrate.
We wouldn't have
you weren't
believed
lying.
Did you like?
we wouldn't have believed you unless you sent the map.
Did you like the visual aid?
That was really nice. A lot of red on that route there. Yeah.
It was a dark red.
Yeah, I understand.
Speaking of Bill Belichick, have you seen what's just come out? And I'm looking at the New York Post. A woman, a 31-year-old political reporter from New York Magazine, has had to be put on administrative leave.
Saw that last night.
Because she has been apparently having an affair with 70-year-old RFK Jr.
Huh.
So there's another May-December romance.
Was she covering the wildlife autopsy beat? Is that how she got put in touch with him in the first place?
But see, I see RFK Jr. being a little bit more desirable than Bill Belichick. If I was a woman, I'd take an RFK Jr. over a Bill Belichick. RFK Jr. is like at least in good shape. Bill Belichick is a mess. Let's get them both on a ring cam.
He looked better. He looked better on that ring cam than you thought he would.
Belichick?
Yeah.
Oh no. He looked every inch his age, every year his age. No, he looked bad.
All right, Olivia Nuzzi, is that it?
Yeah. I got to do this.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.